Do you really know what kind of contributions your scale makes to your SDs? Stick around so I can show you an easy analysis method so you actually know what kind of performance you're gaining out of your milligram scale. Hey guys, it's Peyton with Reloading All Day. And if you watched the first episode of Benchtop Discussions, you'll know that this is the series where we take a deep dive into topics that require a little more nuance, explanation, or heaven forbid, math when it comes to reloading and internal ballistics. But have no fear, I'm going to walk you through an incredibly simple analysis method called root sum squared that you can tailor to your specific rifle, cartridge, load, and scale to determine if upgrading your equipment is the right move. Let's get into it. Now, the most important baseline knowledge today is that factors that contribute to SD are not strictly additive when solving for total SD. This means that you don't get 5 FPS for charge weight variation, and 1 FPS from case volume variation, and 3 FPS from bullet jacket hardness variation. Then it all totals up to a 9 FPS SD. Something like this is known as a worst case analysis, which usually overestimates any inconsistency for practical applications. This is much like using only ES to look at the consistency of hand loads. There's some things that you can glean from it, but at the end of the day, it only tells you about the extremes and has very little information about the distribution between them. Statistical techniques for stack up estimations were introduced in the early 1900s, the most common of which are RSS and Monte Carlo simulation. Instead of adding the different variables together like you would in a worst case analysis, root sum squared combines the root sum square of standard deviations, hence the name. This provides an estimate of the total standard deviation of the combined variations. It's proven to be a quick and effective calculation method for analyzing combined tolerances in manufacturing for years. Like any modeling approach, RSS strives to approximate reality, and the assumptions that it makes must fit your use case. For this scale analysis, we're essentially assuming that the SD of a load has two variables: the variation from charge weight consistency and the variation from everything else. That makes the system simple from an analysis standpoint. RSS, when applied to manufacturing, also assumes linearity of geometries. This would mean that it wouldn't be a good fit for cam paths or some types of springs. For us, that would mean that if there were an effect that wasn't causing linear change, say if a change in primer brisance caused an exponential change in velocity, RSS wouldn't be a good fit. Since we're isolating charge weight, and the effect of the charge weight on velocity is linear, more on that later, RSS remains a good fit. If we intended to make a more complex model of velocity variation and we were adding more variables to the equation, it may be a good idea to step up to a Monte Carlo analysis. This method uses random numbers based on statistical distributions to represent each variable. Multiple trials are run, with each trial having a different combination of values for each variable, and the combined results of these trials provide a probability estimate of the system. That's exactly how applied ballistics gives you a neat and tidy 1,000 shot simulated group on your target at range in the Weapon Employment Zone tool. Monte Carlo analysis would be more accurate than RSS, and in some cases may be the only practical way to analyze complex systems, but it's more laborious and is largely overkill in this case. The examples I've prepared hopefully give you a good cross section of how this analysis functions across a wide variety of cartridges. The first example we'll work through centers around probably one of the most common questions in reloading. Will upgrading from something like a Charge Master to an FX120i improve my velocity SDs? A little aside here that I think should go without saying, but I'll say it for clarity. I'm going to use Charge Master as a colloquialism for scales that measure to that plus or minus zero point 0.1 grain accuracy, and FX120i for milligram scales. This is meant to represent two of the most popular options on the market, but they apply to whatever scale fits those criteria. There's likely exceptions to this, and the one notable option that I know of that doesn't fall into these two groups is the RCBS Matchmaster powder dispenser, which is listed as having an accuracy of 0.04 grains. So it falls in between the two general groups I've defined. The analysis still applies. Because the charge weight sensitivities of each cartridge are going to be different, this must be applied to your specific cartridge. We'll be using some basic values for a 6.5 Creedmoor, but if you follow the process, this method will be applicable to whatever cartridge you have. For this example, there will be 41 grains of powder and a 2,700 foot per second muzzle velocity. Using high quality brass and bullets, say you're getting an 8 FPS SD with the Chargemaster. That's already a respectable value, but you want to see if you can do better. First, we'll find our charge weight sensitivities. Divide muzzle velocity by the charge weight. 2,700 divided by 41 equals 65.85 FPS per grain. This means that for every grain of change in charge weight, we expect about 65 feet per second change in muzzle velocity. Next, we'll apply this to the accuracy of each scale. Readability is plus or minus 0.1 grains for the Chargemaster equivalent, and plus or minus 0.02 grains for the FX120i or equivalent. Now, we will need to make some assumptions here. The specifications for the FX120i list the repeatability of the scale as 0.001 grams. This is a standard deviation, so we can directly use that value. That's about 0.015 grains. The lower end scales don't list repeatability, only accuracy, and only as a plus or minus value. In this case, plus or minus 0.1 grains. We'll give the scale the benefit of the doubt and assume that this is not a standard deviation, in which case we'll use 0.05 grains SD to account for 95% of the charges truly being plus or minus 0.1 grains from the intended value. Now, I did test this assumption. My Chargemaster, throwing 40 grains of N135 over 50 samples, displayed a 0.03 grain SD. The same scale, throwing 80 grains of Retumbo over 50 samples, displayed a 0.7 SD. So I think that using 0.05 grains SD is a fine average for the Chargemaster. When these values are applied to the charge weight sensitivity, we multiply by the scale SD. For the Chargemaster, 0.05 grains times 65.85 feet per second per grain. This equals 3.29 feet per second. For the FX120i, 0.015 times 65.85 equals 0.99 feet per second. This is the individual contribution of each scale to the SD. Now, to compare one scale to the other, we'll take our current velocity SD of 8 feet per second, and we'll set that equal to the square root of the Chargemaster contribution, 3.29 squared, plus x squared. And we'll solve for x as the remainder of our total velocity inconsistency. In this case, x equals 7.29 feet per second. This is the contribution of everything but charge weight consistency to the SD. Now, we'll complete the RSS analysis for the FX120i. We'll take everything else, 7.29 feet per second squared, plus the contribution of the FX120i, 0.99 feet per second squared. This equals 7.36 feet per second SD. That's an improvement of 0.64 feet per second SD over our previous SD of 8. Now, considering that SDs of this level, in the single digits, generally have a variability measured in feet per second, day to day, even over 100 shots, and not tenths of feet per second, you won't be able to measure this difference with any level of certainty. Trust me when I say it would take hundreds of rounds to converge your estimate of true SD to within 1 feet per second, let alone half a foot per second. The bottom line is that powder charge variability of this level is not alone a majority of the error in your loads. And this is in top components. What if you're using worse brass? Well, if you're not shelling out for high quality components and you hypothetically get a 15 foot per second SD from your charge master, we can run back through the RSS calculations again. 15 equals 3.29. Let me make that 2 a little clearer. 29. That is the charge master contribution plus x squared. We're solving for x, which is everything else contributing to the SD. This will be 14.63 feet per second. And then plugging back in, we get 14.63 feet per second squared plus 0.99 squared. The FX120i contributes, and you will get 14.67 FPS SD, an improvement of 0.33 FPS. This goes to show that if you don't already have good components and your loading process isn't already consistent, chasing absolute precision on the scale isn't going to help you that much. Now, I mentioned earlier that the relationship between powder charge and velocity is a linear relationship. That comes with a small caveat that this behavior is at the pressures that powder and cartridges are designed for. There are edge and corner cases in which it will stray from linearity, like low charge weights or incomplete burn. I'm looking at you, pistol shooters, but generally that relationship is linear. This is especially true since the small charge increments we're working with should be very similar in combustion anyway. If you're experiencing differently, it's most likely an error stemming from small sample sizes. Ladder tests are notorious for this when single shots are used at each charge weight. You can see flat spots in all these examples of ladder tests, but as you overlay them on top of one another, you start to see the messy and chaotic nature of the distribution at each charge weight. Firing enough rounds to get a good average of your velocity at each charge weight, you should be seeing something very close to a linear relationship, shown here by an R squared value very close to 1. Now, 6.5 Creed is mid-sized. What about a 300 Remington Ultra Mag slinging a 180 grain Berger Elite Hunter at 3,100 feet a second with 97 grains of powder? Maybe this guy is making a 10 foot per second SD. This equals a charge weight sensitivity of 31.96 feet per second per grain. The scale contributions are 1.6 feet per second from the charge master and 0.48 feet per second from the FX120i. 10 SD, 1.60 squared plus x squared. X equals 9.87 FPS. Plug back in. 9.87 squared plus 0.48 squared equals 9.88 FPS SD. An improvement of 0.12 feet per second SD. You will never be able to show statistical significance of this level improvement in any practical way. You'd burn the barrel out well before you reach the required level of certainty for a single scale, let alone two. Now, what about for smaller cartridges? For the PRS guys, a 6GT shooting a 105 grain bullet at 2,900 feet per second with 34 grains of powder, making it an 8 foot per second SD. All right. This equals a powder charge sensitivity of 85.29 feet per second per grain. The scale contributions to this, the Charge Master, is 4.26 feet per second, and the FX120i is 1.28 feet per second. The SD taking away the Charge Master is 6.77 FPS. And then plugging back in 6.77 squared plus 1.28 squared equals 6.89 FPS SD. An improvement of 1.11 feet per second SD. Again, this would take an absolutely massive amount of rounds to correctly test because it's still such a small change in SD. And my challenge for you, run this through a WES analysis. Does it even change your hit probability on the longest or smallest targets you'll realistically engage? My bets would be on most likely not. Even the F-class guys may only see a 1 or 2% change in hit probability in the 10 ring. But maybe that's enough to justify it for them. For the PRS guys, I would bet that you will see no change in this level of improvement to your SD. Now, you can work this backwards too. And this is an interesting case to me. Can I save time throwing powder volumetrically without trashing my SDs too badly? Maybe you're loading bulk ammo for gassers, and you really just don't want to put that much effort into it, even for precision ammo. Now, when you throw powder volumetrically, you do need to be concerned about how well the powder meters, of course. This will obviously work best with ball powders or fine grained extruded options, but I guess you could throw Rotumbo through one if you were willing to accept the results it gives you. Regardless, the consistency of your powder dropper needs to be tested with individual powders, and your dropper and your technique may yield different consistencies from your buddies, even if he's throwing the same powder through the same measure. Luckily, this is easy to do. Just throw some charges with the powder you intend to use. I used my Lee perfect powder measure within 135 and dropped those thrown charges directly on the FX120i. Take 30 to 50 measurements and calculate the SD of that dataset however you wish. Online calculators are available, as well as Excel or Google Sheets. My test with about 23 grains of powder showed an SD of the dropped powder charge of 0.08 grains. Now that you know the consistency of the powder measure, you can treat it exactly the same as a scale in the calculation. Say you've got a 223 with 77 SMKs at 2,600 feet a second using 23 grains of powder, and you're able to achieve a 12 FPS SD on the FX120i. That's a charge weight sensitivity of 113.04 feet per second per grain. You'll notice that this is much higher than our other examples due to the relatively small charge weight. The FX120i, in this case, is contributing 1.70 feet per second. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And the powder dropper, 0.08.04, is contributing 9.04 feet per second. So to take the FX 120i out of the equation, we do the same as we have been doing. Do 1.70 squared plus x squared. X in this case equals 11.88 FPS SD. And then solving for the powder measure, you get 11.88 squared plus 9.04 squared, which will equal 14.93 FPS SD. Now this is larger because we're going from the FX120i to a powder dropper. This is a much bigger change than the other cases. We're gaining about 2.93 feet per second, but it's still not terrible for gassers. Now you can run your WES analysis and see if that SD still fits your use case. If that's full-size dipsticks at 600 yards, maybe that doesn't change your hit probability at all. Why not go ahead and load that ammo on your Dillon and save the time if it doesn't change your hit probability at all? So there's got to be caveats to all this, right? It can't just be this simple. First, we will be performing some live fire testing on this in the future. But in the meantime, I would like to emphasize that this is a statistical model. This video is about a statistical model and using that analysis to predict the effects of scale accuracy on muzzle velocity consistency. Because it's a model, there's always some chance that reality functions a little bit differently. But analyzing things in this way is no different than using AB's WES tool to look at the performance of ammo with respect to external ballistics. This is used in industry to great success, and this is an application of it to our pastime and hobby. Remember that if you are going to do your own testing regarding this, please design your testing well and do it right from the get-go for your own sanity. Second, I don't know how this would do with subsonic ammo. That probably gets into the odd nonlinear behaviors of powder charge weight, so you guys are going to have to proceed with caution. I know there's not a ton of guys out there trying to get super low SDs with subs, but there's a few, and I care about you too. You may be able to shoot 2 charge weights, like one at your intended load and one some amount above, like a grain or a half a grain or something, and then use those 2 velocities to get the charge weight sensitivity for that combustion regime, and it would probably be close enough for estimates. You could do that with supersonic stuff too if you really wanted to get nitpicky about it, but I think you'd be burning a lot of powder for what I would guess would end up being mostly confirmation. I don't know. If you're a subsonic guy and you want to talk to me more about it, email me at reloadingalldayresearch@gmail.com. Third, you have to use good sample sizes when testing your SDs. Garbage in equals garbage out. And if you have garbage predictions of your SD, this is basically useless. I've seen it too many times where a load looks awesome for 5 or 10 shots, and that SD falls apart when it gets tested a little more rigorously. 30 shots minimum. Set your Garmin down while you train, shoot the ammo you're going to shoot anyway, and if you don't have a Garmin, I can't recommend them highly enough, but you'll just have to buckle down and shoot some significant sample sizes in either your endless pursuit of knowledge or in your pure rage and desire to prove me wrong. So what does this mean for reloaders? Well, the FX120i or similar milligram scales are likely contributing to improved SDs from a mathematically calculable sense. They are more consistent. They will throw more consistent charges. They will make your loads more consistent. But physically seeing a statistically significant improvement on paper or in your chronograph is going to be difficult based on this analysis. If you're using top-end components already and your process is dialed in, you might see some benefit from it. A couple inches of overall vertical dispersion at 1,000 yards, maybe. If you're shooting magnums with case capacities that rival the gas tank of a 1965 Volkswagen Beetle, you may not ever be able to detect an improvement. If you're shooting at higher velocities with smaller charge weights, like a 17 Fireball or a 6GT or something, you may have better chances of seeing a performance gain. Whether that performance gain on the chrono actually translates to an improvement in hit percentage is all based on your specific use case, target size, environment, etc. On the flip side, maybe this means volumetric powder throwing is worth a look to you. If the analysis gives an SD that's still within your performance window, maybe you can save yourself a little time at the bench. It's worth a try. I'm not saying that milligram scales are worthless, because I absolutely will not be getting rid of my FX120i. They are incredibly cool. When paired with some of the auto thrower systems on the market, they're dropping wonderfully consistent charges at blazing speeds, and they do offer a confidence boost in the fact that you know, without a doubt, that your charge weights are as consistent as you can make them. Sometimes any of those reasons alone can make the scale worth it. This video doesn't exist to tell you what you should or shouldn't buy. It's only meant to give you another tool for examining your situation and use cases from a more objective standpoint. Whatever your reason for being here and whatever discipline you shoot, get down there in the comments with an analysis of your chosen system and let us know what you think about it. Let me know what you thought of the video. If it was worth something to you, come back in the future. I'll keep trying to put out informational and valuable content for you. Now go forth and take a little more guesswork out of internal ballistics. We'll see you in the next one.